Hi, everybody. My name is Gabrielle,
I'm Ricky.
I'm Maddox.
I'm Catherine.
and today we are going to be talking to you about oxygen in the body. So, we all know that air is essential for human life. Oxygen, especially, is essential for human life. A human breathes in approximately 11,000 liters of air every day. But today we're going to talk a little bit about how oxygen is transported into and around our blood systems. Oxygen, O2, is transported via the bloodstream to the lungs to all parts of our bodies. Oxygen diffuses from the bloodstream into the cells where it is used in aerobic respiration. This is the major process that provides energy using glucose as an energy source. The overall reaction for the aerobic respiration is shown on this next slide. 6 moles of oxygen are consumed for every mole of glucose, and a good supply of O2 is essential to enable our blood cells and bodies to function normally. Similarly, most of the organisms found from the smallest single cell amobia to the largest elephant depend on supplies of O2 to survive. Now I'm going to pass it off to Catherine.
Yeah, so one thing that oxygen is used for is to help with our muscles and how our muscles are used. And one of the largest muscles that we have to bring in oxygen is our lungs. So when the volume of our lungs increase, then the pressure decreases and air is able to come in. And when the volume decreases, pressure increases and lets us exhale. So as we breathe in oxygen, the oxygen flows through our bloodstreams and muscles are able to get this oxygen from our lungs. As we go on and we use this oxygen, we produce CO2, which is waste. And this waste travels through the blood and then diffuses back into the lungs and gets exhaled out. One thing that is interesting about this process is that the pH of deoxygenated blood is measured through these chemoreceptors in the brain and blood vessels. And as CO2 levels rise, the blood pH falls. So that's really interesting that our body can regulate that. And if our CO2 levels are too high, then signals are sent to our brain to alter our breathing patterns. And this is why when we exercise, we use a lot of oxygen because our muscles are being used and moving. And then we need more oxygen in order to keep up, and we start panting in order to get more oxygen into our system. This other interesting part about muscles and oxygen is myoglobin proteins. And these proteins are found exclusively in muscle tissue and are most present in heart and skeletal muscles, and they're less concentrated in smooth muscles. They act as a storage site and facilitate transportation of oxygen through the muscle. And this is highly important because it just supplies oxygen through all of our muscles and gets oxygen there very quickly. It can extract oxygen from the blood easily because it has a high affinity to oxygen, and it also binds to oxygen and releases it into the mitochondria. And as you can see, there's the skeletal image of this protein, and it contains a Fe cation bound to a heme group. And it also exists with two cations, a 2 plus as a reduced form and a 3 plus as an oxidized state.
Hi, also, oxygen can be transported through the bloodstream to other groups that aren't muscles, such as organs. This is very crucial for complex organisms on Earth to have a system for transporting oxygen throughout the body. Diffusion of oxygen inside living organisms is too slow to support aerobic respiration reactions on their own. And chemically, these organisms will use transition metals such as iron to help transport oxygen within the body. On the right, you can see a close-up image of a red blood cell. And on the image on the right, it is ferritin inside of a blood cell, which is where oxygen and iron sit dormant in the cell until the oxygen can be moved around the body to organ. Another transporter of oxygen in the body is hemoglobins. And this is the, as you can see, the hemoglobin has a very similar structure to the myoglobin. It has the iron here in the middle. The main difference is these two groups down here at the bottom. The body relies on the iron's ability to bond to smaller molecules such as the nitrogen hydrogen, and oxygen in order to transport the oxygen throughout the body. Because the iron has 8 valence electrons, it can easily take on these smaller molecules and transport them easily to other chemical groups. Hemoglobins are iron-containing proteins in the blood that transports oxygen to not only muscles but tissues as well. The hemoglobin forms an unstable, reversible bond with oxygen. In an oxygenated state, it is called an oxyhemoglobin and is bright red. And when it is in the reduced state, it is purplish blue. When the hemoglobin is finished transporting oxygen, it will then reuse the iron in the body, while the excess parts of the hemoglobin will be secreted into the body's bile.
I'm going to be talking about how oxygen in our blood heals our wounds. When your skin gets cut, scraped, or punctured, our body goes through a hemostasis, causing our blood to naturally start to coagulate itself with red blood cells and plug up the wound, preventing further blood loss. When your wound is finally closed itself with a clot, our blood vessels open a little, allowing oxygen into the wound for healing. The correct amount of oxygen is very important when a wound is healing, because too much or too little and the wound will not heal correctly. In addition to the red blood cells, our white blood cells, or macrophages, fight off any infections that may have passed through the wound. Macrophages also produce a chemical messenger called growth factors, which help repair the wound. Tissue growth and rebuilding occurs next. Red blood cells can help create collagen. They are white fibers that form a foundation for the new tissue. The wound starts to fill in with new tissue called granulation tissue, and new skin begins to form over this. One of the most important factors for this process is the amount of blood supply is able to get to the wound. The amount of the blood and nutrients are essential to be carried to the wound successfully. If there's an inadequate blood supply, the wound will take at least twice as long to heal. These are called chronic wounds. More times than often, as a result, you'll see a scar as a result of the process with normal blood supply. Although the process seems simple, this process is quite complicated and it involves a lot of chemical signals.